stood on the porch of my childhood home, gripping two battered suitcases while my 5-year-old daughter Kaida clung to my leg. The sheriff's eviction notice was still crumpled in my pocket, 24 hours to vacate because my ex hadn't paid rent in 3 months. I'd had no idea. I'd been sending him my half every month like clockwork, trusting him to handle it. The betrayal of that discovery still burned in my chest. But right now, I needed my mother. I needed the woman who'd raised me to open her door and tell me everything would be okay. Instead, Karina stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, that tight smile she reserved for inconvenient situations plastered across her face. Neighbors were peeking over the fence, watching our family drama unfold. "Mom, I know this is sudden," I started, my voice shaking. "But I called you yesterday. You said, 'We have no space for you,'" she interrupted, her voice sharp and cold. Then she lowered it to a whisper, glancing at Kaida with obvious distaste. "Not with your situation." Before I could respond, before I could even process what was happening, she stepped back into the house and closed the door. The lock clicked with finality, and right then, as I stood there in shock, a large delivery truck pulled into the driveway. The delivery truck rumbled past me, and 2 workers jumped out carrying a massive headboard wrapped in plastic. I watched in disbelief as they knocked on the door I'd just been shut out of. My mother answered immediately, all smiles now, directing them inside. "The guest suite is down the hall," I heard her say cheerfully. "Yes, the whole room is being redone." Guest suite. The same room she'd just claimed didn't exist. The same space I'd grown up in. I felt Kaida tugging at my shirt. "Mama, why won't Grandma let us in?" she asked, her voice small and confused. I couldn't answer. I couldn't form words around the lump in my throat. One of the delivery workers approached me with a clipboard. "Ma'am, you're blocking the driveway. Could you move your car?" "When did she order this furniture?" I heard myself ask. He checked his paperwork. "Says here the order was placed yesterday afternoon. Rush delivery." Yesterday afternoon. Hours after I'd called my mother, crying, begging for help, explaining that I'd just discovered the eviction notice. Hours after she'd said, "Of course, sweetheart, come home, we'll figure this out together." She'd lied with preparation. She'd known exactly what she was going to do, and she'd spent money on furniture to make sure I knew I wasn't welcome. "Ma'am," the worker said again. Then he noticed an envelope tucked into his clipboard. Oh, weird. This was taped to the furniture box. "It's addressed to you." My hands shook as I took the envelope from the delivery worker. My name was written across the front in handwriting I recognized immediately, my late grandmother Winslet's distinctive cursive. But that was impossible. Grandma had died 3 years ago. I tore open the envelope while Kaida pressed against my side. Inside was a single piece of paper, yellowed slightly with age, with just one sentence written in the center. "If your mother pushes you out again, it's time you learn the truth about the house." My breath caught, again, like Grandma had known this would happen, like she'd predicted my mother would do exactly this. I looked up at the house, the home I'd grown up in, the place that had belonged to Grandma before she'd passed it to my mother. What truth? What was Grandma trying to tell me? The delivery workers were hauling more furniture past me now. A dresser, a nightstand, a luxury armchair, all for the guest suite my mother claimed didn't have space for me. I carefully folded the note and put it back in the envelope, then picked up my suitcases. "Come on, baby," I said to Kaida. "Let's get back in the car." But as I turned toward our old sedan, I saw movement in the backyard. My brother Torin was there, laughing with my mother like this was just another ordinary day. I watched through the fence as Torin and my mother stood together near the patio furniture, both holding coffee cups, both completely relaxed. Like I wasn't standing 50 feet away with everything I owned in 2 suitcases. Like my daughter wasn't crying quietly beside me. Torin saw me starring and raised his cup in a mocking toast. That's when I knew he'd been in on this. My mother hadn't just decided on her own to shut me out. She discussed it with him, planned it with him. The delivery workers finished unloading and drove away, leaving me standing alone in the driveway. I could see into the house through the open door, straight down the hallway to the guest suite. The room looked completely renovated. Fresh paint, new curtains, professional staging like something from a magazine. My mother had spent weeks preparing this space, all while knowing I'd be evicted, all while planning to reject me when I asked for help. I loaded our suitcases into the car, buckled Kaida into her seat, and pulled out Grandma's note again. The truth about the house. I needed to figure out what she meant, but first I needed to get Kaida somewhere safe for the night. I started the engine and began backing out of the driveway when Torrin suddenly appeared at my window, knocking on the glass. Against my better judgment, I rolled it down. "What do you want?" I asked. He shrugged casually. "Mom just doesn't want your chaos here, Linnea." "You understand, right? Especially with—" He glanced at Kaida. "The kid and everything." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Her name is Kaida, your niece, and Mom told me to come. She said we'd figure it out together." Torrin laughed, actually laughed like I'd told a joke. "Did she? Or did you hear what you wanted to hear?" He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "Look, Mom's got her life set up perfectly now. She's got her book club, her garden parties, her reputation. She doesn't need her struggling single mom daughter showing up and making her look bad." The cruelty in his voice was casual, practiced, like he'd said these things about me before. "When did she tell you?" I asked quietly. His expression flickered just for a second. "Tell me what?" "About my eviction. When did she tell you I was coming?" "I don't know what you—" "When, Torrin?" He sighed, annoyed at being caught. "A few weeks ago. Some court notice came to the house for you. You must have listed this as a backup address or something. Mom opened it. She's known for weeks that you were getting evicted." The air left my lungs. Weeks. My mother had known for weeks that I was about to lose my home. And instead of warning me or offering help, she'd let me scramble, let me panic, let me discover the eviction notice taped to my door with no warning. Then she'd waited for my desperate phone call so she could reject me with maximum impact. "You're both horrible people," I whispered. Torrin straightened up. "We're practical people. There's a difference." He walked away without another word, leaving me sitting there with Grandma's note burning in my pocket. I drove to a cheap motel on the edge of town and paid for one night with the last of my cash. Kaida fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the emotional day. I sat on the scratchy comforter and finally let myself check my phone. 3 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize, a voicemail notification. With shaking hands, I pressed play. "Ms. Linnea Hart, this is calling from the law offices of Sterling and Associates regarding your grandmother Winslet Hart's estate. We've been trying to reach you for several weeks now. There are some final notes about the property that require your signature. Please call us back at your earliest convenience. This is a time-sensitive matter." I played it again and again. Estate, property. Grandma had died 3 years ago. Everything had been settled then, or so I'd been told. My mother had handled all the legal matters, saying I was too grief-stricken to deal with paperwork. I'd been grateful at the time. Now I wondered what else she'd handled without me. I Googled the law office. Legitimate, downtown address, good reviews. I checked the time, too late to call tonight, but I'd phone them first thing tomorrow. I looked at Grandma's note again, studying every word. "If your mother pushes you out again," like this wasn't the first time. And suddenly I remembered, really remembered, all the times growing up when I'd needed help and my mother had found reasons to say no, when I needed money for college. When I got pregnant and needed support. Every time, she'd positioned herself as the martyr who just couldn't enable my poor choices. But to everyone else, she was the devoted mother trying her best with a difficult daughter. I'd been her scapegoat my entire life, and I'd been too close to see it. The next morning, I dropped Kaida at a free community daycare and called the law office. The receptionist put me through to Sterling immediately. "Ms. Hart, thank you for calling back," he said warmly. "I was beginning to worry. Your grandmother's estate has some unresolved matters that require your attention." "I don't understand," I said. "I thought everything was finalized years ago." "So did we, until we found some additional documents in our archives during a recent office reorganization. Your grandmother filed an addendum to her will about 6 months before she passed, a very specific addendum regarding the property." My heart started racing. "What kind of addendum? I'd rather discuss this in person if possible. When can you come in?" We scheduled an appointment for that afternoon. I used the last of my gas money to drive downtown, my mind spinning with possibilities. The office was in a historic building with dark wood paneling and leather chairs. Sterling was a kind-looking man in his 60s who immediately offered me coffee and a comfortable seat. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman," he began. "Very thoughtful, very deliberate in her planning. She came to see me privately about 6 months before she died, without telling anyone in the family. She said she wanted to make sure certain things were protected." He pulled out a folder. "She filed an addendum stating that the family home should have shared ownership rights between her 2 daughters, your mother Karina, and you, Linnea." The room tilted. "What?" She was very specific about preventing what she called family control imbalance. She wanted to ensure you had legal rights to the property, not just your mother. I stared at Sterling, unable to process what he was saying. But I'm not. I'm her granddaughter, not her daughter. Sterling smiled gently. I apologize, I misspoke. She listed you specifically as a co-owner alongside your mother. The property was to be held jointly between Karina and Linnea, not left solely to Karina as the sole heir. My mother never mentioned this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. No, Sterling agreed, his expression darkening. She wouldn't have. Because according to our records, your mother came in shortly after Winslet's death, claiming to handle all the estate paperwork. She signed out several documents, including this addendum. She was supposed to return them within a week. She never did. He pulled out a log sheet showing my mother's signature, dated 3 years ago. When we followed up, she claimed the documents had been misplaced during her grieving process. We assumed they'd turn up eventually. They never did. My hands were shaking. So you're saying my mother deliberately hid documents that proved I own part of the house? I'm saying the documents went missing while in her possession, yes. And now, 3 years later, she's been living in and renovating a house that legally belongs to both of you. Sterling leaned forward. Ms. Hart, there's something else. The addendum referenced a second page with specific details about ownership percentages. We never received that page back. Do you have any idea where your mother might have kept important documents? I thought about Grandma's note, the blue tin in the garage. I might, I said slowly. I might know exactly where. I left Sterling's office with a mission. I needed to get into my mother's garage and find that blue tin. But I couldn't just walk up and ask. She'd slam the door in my face again, or worse, hide whatever evidence existed. I needed a plan. I spent the afternoon watching the house from down the street, feeling like a criminal stalking my own childhood home. Finally, around 4 o'clock, I saw my mother leave in her car, dressed up like she was heading to one of her social clubs. This was my chance. I drove up to the house, my heart pounding, and parked on the street instead of the driveway. The detached garage was accessible from the side yard without going near the main house. I'd played in that garage as a child, knew exactly where everything was kept. The side door was unlocked. My mother had always been careless about the garage since there was nothing valuable inside, or so she thought. I slipped inside, closing the door quietly behind me. The space smelled like dust and old motor oil. Garden tools hung on the walls. Boxes were stacked in corners. And in the back, under a pile of old blankets on a shelf, I found it. A blue metal tin, rusted at the edges exactly like Grandma had described. My hands trembled as I pulled it down and pried open the lid. Inside were papers, lots of them. Letters in Grandma's handwriting. Photocopies of documents. And there, on top, a legal paper with Addendum 2 Last Will and Testament printed across the top. I'd found it. I'd actually found it. I sat down on the concrete floor and carefully pulled out the addendum. The language was formal and legal, but the meaning was clear. Winslet Hart had left the property at 847 Maple Street jointly to Karina Hart, daughter, and Linnea Hart, granddaughter, with specified ownership percentages to be detailed on page 2. I flipped through the pages frantically. No page 2. Sterling had been right, it was missing. But there was something else in the tin. A handwritten note from Grandma, dated just days before her death. Linnea, if you're reading this, your mother has done exactly what I feared. I've left you these copies as protection. The original documents are with Sterling. If anything is missing from his files, you'll know who took it. The full addendum gives you 60% ownership of this house because I knew Karina would try to control everything. She doesn't know this. Don't let her erase you the way she's tried to your whole life. The house is your security, your foundation. Claim it. Love, Grandma. 60%. I own more than half of the house I'd just been rejected from. The guest suite my mother claimed didn't have space for me. Legally, more than half of it was mine. I was carefully reading through the other documents when I heard a car door slam outside. Footsteps, coming toward the garage. My mother was home early. I shoved the papers back into the tin and stood up just as the side door opened. Karina stood there in the doorway, her face going from surprise to fury in seconds. "What are you doing in here?" she demanded. I held the blue tin against my chest, my heart hammering. "I'm collecting what's mine." My mother's eyes locked onto the tin and her face went pale. "You have no right to be in here. That's private property." "Private property?" I repeated, almost laughing at the irony. "This is Grandma's tin. These are Grandma's documents. Documents you stole from Sterling's office 3 years ago." She stepped inside and closed the door behind her, and suddenly the garage felt very small. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "The addendum, Mom, the will addendum that gave me partial ownership of this house, the one you signed out and never returned." Her jaw tightened. "You're delusional. Grief makes people imagine things. Sterling has your signature in his log," I pressed. "He has records of exactly what you took, and Grandma left me copies." I gestured to the tin. "She knew you'd try to hide this." For a long moment, my mother just stared at me, then her mask cracked. "You aren't getting this house," she hissed. "After everything I've done, everything I've built here, you don't get to just show up and take it, not after being such a disappointment your entire life." The venom in her voice was startling. "I'm not taking anything," I said quietly. "I'm claiming what was already mine. There's a difference." She lunged forward suddenly, reaching for the tin. "Give that to me." I stepped back, holding it out of reach. "No." We stood there in a tense standoff, her breathing hard, me gripping the tin like my life depended on it. Then the garage door opened again. Torin stood there, looking between us with confusion. "What's going on?" he asked. My mother immediately shifted her expression, tears springing to her eyes. "She broke into the garage," she said, her voice shaking. "She's trying to steal things." Torin looked at me, then at the tin in my hands. "Linnea, what are you doing?" "I'm taking documents Grandma left for me," I said calmly. "Documents that prove Mom has been lying about the inheritance." "She's unstable," my mother cut in quickly. "She's imagining things again, you know how she gets." That phrase, "you know how she gets," had been used my entire life to dismiss me, to make me seem irrational, to ensure nobody believed me when I spoke up. I looked at Torin. "Did you know that Grandma left me part of this house?" His face flickered with something surprise, maybe. "What?" "The addendum Mom hid from Sterling's office. It gives me 60% ownership. The house you both thought was entirely Mom's, it's legally mine." "That's ridiculous," my mother snapped. "She's making things up." "Then why did you hide the documents?" I asked her directly. "Why didn't you tell me 3 years ago that Grandma left me part of the property?" She had no answer, just fury in her eyes. I turned and walked toward the door, clutching the tin. "Don't follow me, don't call me. I'm taking this to Sterling and we're sorting out the legal reality. You can either cooperate or fight it in court. Your choice." I pushed past Torin and walked to my car. As I buckled myself in, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Zella, Torin's wife. I know what your mom is hiding. We need to talk." I drove to a coffee shop and texted Zella back. She arrived 20 minutes later, looking nervous and checking over her shoulder like she was afraid someone had followed her. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "I've wanted to talk to you for months, but I didn't know how." "What do you know?" I asked directly. Zella took a deep breath. "About 6 months ago, I overheard Karina on the phone with her lawyer. She was talking about taking care of some documents so you wouldn't have a claim." I didn't fully understand then, but after seeing her freak out this morning when Torin told me what happened, she pulled out her phone. "I took a picture. I was in the hallway when Karina was sorting through papers on the dining room table. She didn't know I was there. I thought it was strange that she was spreading out legal documents, so I snapped a quick photo to ask Torin about later. But when I tried to bring it up, he shut me down and said I was being paranoid." She turned her phone toward me. The photo was slightly blurry but clear enough. My mother sat at the dining room table surrounded by official-looking papers. And there, visible in the foreground, was a document with page 2 ownership distribution printed across the top. "That's the missing page," I breathed. "I think she destroyed it," Zella said quietly. "After this photo, I never saw those papers again." But I kept the picture because something felt wrong. She looked at me with genuine concern. "Linnea, your mother has been talking about you terribly for years, making you sound unstable and irresponsible. I always wondered if it was true or if she was manipulating the story." I showed Zella the contents of the blue tin, Grandma's note, the partial addendum, everything. She read it all in silence, her expression growing darker. "This is fraud," she finally said. "She deliberately hid documents that proved your ownership. That's illegal." "I know." I pulled out my phone. "I need to get this to Sterling immediately. Will you come with me? Will you show him the photo?" She nodded without hesitation. "Yes, I'm tired of watching Torin and Karina treat you like you're nothing. It's cruel and it's wrong." We drove to Sterling's office together. When we arrived, I spread everything across his desk. The tin, the documents, Zella's photo, all of it. Sterling examined each piece carefully, his expression growing more serious. When he finally looked up, he said, "Ms. Hart, if this photo shows what I think it shows, page 2 of the addendum, then your mother has knowingly withheld and likely destroyed legal documents. This isn't just an estate dispute anymore. This could be criminal." My hands were shaking. What do I do? First, we file an emergency petition with the court to freeze any transactions involving the property. Your mother can't sell or refinance until this is resolved. Second, we request a full audit of the estate handling. And third, he looked at me seriously, you need to prepare for your mother to fight this with everything she has. This will get ugly. It's already ugly, I said quietly. Sterling nodded sympathetically. Then let's make sure the truth comes out. I'll start filing paperwork immediately. In the meantime, do you have somewhere safe to stay? I thought about the motel, my dwindling funds, my daughter waiting at daycare. I'll figure something out. You shouldn't have to, Zella said firmly. You can stay with Torin and me. I looked at Zella in surprise. You're serious? Completely. Torin might not like it, but he'll deal with it. This is the right thing to do. She met my eyes. Your mother kicked you out with a child. That's unforgivable. I'm not going to stand by and watch anymore. That night, I picked up Kaida and drove to Torin and Zella's house. Torin answered the door looking uncomfortable but resigned. Zella told me you're staying here, he said without preamble. I don't love it, but… Fine, guest room is upstairs. It wasn't warm, but it was shelter. As I tucked Kaida into bed that night, she asked, Are we going to be okay, Mama? I stroked her hair. Yes, baby, we're going to be better than okay. Over the next week, Sterling worked fast. The court granted the emergency petition, freezing the property. My mother received notification and immediately started calling me dozens of calls, ranging from tearful to furious to threatening. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I followed Sterling's advice, document everything, stay calm, and let the legal process work. Then Sterling called with news. We found it, he said, barely containing his excitement. What? Page 2. It was in our archive storage, misfiled under a different case number. Someone, likely your mother, tried to hide it there, assuming it would never be found. But during our audit, we located it. My heart stopped. And Linnea, your grandmother left you 62% ownership of the property. Your mother has 38%. You are the majority owner. Legally, you have control of that house. The next day, my mother showed up at Torin and Zella's house, pounding on the door. Zella answered while I stayed in the background with Kaida. I need to speak with Linnea, my mother demanded. She's not interested in speaking with you, Zella replied calmly. That's my daughter. She doesn't get to hide from me. She's not hiding. She's protecting herself from your manipulation. My mother's face contorted with rage. You don't know anything about our family. I know you kicked your daughter and granddaughter out onto the street while spending thousands on furniture for a guest room. I know you hid legal documents that proved Linnea owned the majority of your house. I know you've spent years making her seem unstable so nobody would believe her when she finally stood up to you. Zella's voice was steel. I know enough. My mother tried to push past her, but Zella stood firm. If you don't leave, I'll call the police for trespassing. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then my mother looked past Zella to where I stood with Kaida. This isn't over, she said coldly. You're not taking my house. It's not your house, I said quietly. It never was. Grandma made sure of that. She left, but not before leaving a voicemail that was equal parts threatening and pleading. Sterling advised me to save it as evidence of harassment. The legal process moved forward. Sterling filed for a full resolution of the estate, including accounting for any renovations or sales my mother had made using house equity. The court ordered a family mediation session. My mother arrived with her own lawyer, a sharp-dressed man who immediately tried to paint me as an opportunist trying to steal from my grieving mother. My client has lived in and maintained this property for years, he argued. She's paid all expenses, handled all renovations. Ms. Hart has contributed nothing and now wants to claim ownership. That's unconscionable. Sterling calmly presented the addendum, the ownership percentages, and the timeline of my mother's document hiding. Ms. Hart wasn't given the opportunity to contribute because her ownership was deliberately hidden from her. Had she known, she would have exercised her legal rights years ago. The mediator reviewed all the documents in silence. Finally, she looked up at my mother. Mrs. Hart, did you or did you not sign out estate documents from Sterling's office 3 years ago with the stated intention of returning them? My mother hesitated. Yes, but I lost them during a difficult time. Lost them, or hid them? The mediator held up Zella's photo. Because we have evidence suggesting you were in possession of Page too well after your mother's death. My mother's lawyer jumped in. That photo could have been taken at any time. It proves nothing. It proves she had the documents, Sterling countered. Combined with the timeline, her refusal to inform Linnea of her ownership, and her recent renovation expenditures, it establishes a clear pattern of deception. The mediator turned to my mother. Mrs. Hart, your mother created that addendum specifically to prevent one person from having total control. She wanted balanced ownership between you and your daughter. By hiding those documents, you violated her wishes and deprived Linnea of her legal rights. That's very serious. My mother's face was red. She's my mother's granddaughter, not her daughter. She doesn't deserve equal ownership. I'm the one who took care of her at the end. I'm the one who hid documents, the mediator interrupted. Who spent equity on renovations without consulting the actual majority owner. Who, according to testimony, rejected your daughter's request for temporary housing in a guest room that's legally more hers than yours. The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, the mediator spoke. I'm recommending the court recognize Linnea's 62% ownership as established in the addendum. Mrs. Hart, you'll need to either buy out Linnea's share at fair market value or accept her as the majority owner with legal authority over the property. Those are your options. My mother's face went through a series of expressions: shock, rage, disbelief. That's my home, she whispered. I've lived there for 30 years. 30 years, I said, speaking up for the first time. And Grandma lived there for 40 years before that. This was her house and she chose who to leave it to. You just didn't like her choice. You can't just take my home, she insisted, looking at the mediator desperately. I'm not taking anything, I said firmly. I'm claiming what was always mine. You're the one who took something. You took my inheritance and hid it. You kicked me out of a house I legally owned. You told me there was no space for me in a guest room that's 62% mine. The mediator closed her folder. I'll submit my recommendations to the court. You'll both receive formal notification within 2 weeks. In the meantime, Mrs. Hart, I strongly suggest you don't make any changes to the property or attempt to contact Ms. Hart outside of legal channels. My mother stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. She's manipulating all of you just like she always does. She's the dramatic one, the unstable one, Mrs. Hart, the mediator said sharply. You're not helping your case. We have documented evidence of your actions. If you continue, this will escalate to a formal fraud investigation. My mother's lawyer put a hand on her arm, silencing her. They left the mediation room together, my mother's face twisted with fury. Once they were gone, Sterling turned to me with a slight smile. That went better than I expected. What happens now? I asked. Now we wait for the court order, but based on what just happened, I think we're looking at a favorable outcome. 2 weeks later, the court order arrived. The judge had reviewed all evidence and ruled in my favor. I was recognized as the 62% majority owner of 847 Maple Street. My mother had 30 days to either purchase my share at appraised value or vacate the premises under terms I would set as majority owner. She couldn't afford to buy me out. Sterling had confirmed that, which meant I had a choice to make. I could force her out completely, claim the entire house, and leave her with nothing. Or I could be more measured. I chose measured. I drafted a formal notice through Sterling. My mother could continue living in the house, but she would pay me fair market rent for her portion. The guest suite would be returned to my control within 7 days. Any future renovations or major decisions would require my approval as majority owner. When my mother received the notice, she called a family meeting at Torrin's house, probably hopping for allies. I showed up with Sterling and Zella. Torrin looked uncomfortable from the moment I walked in. My mother sat at the head of the table, her usual place of control, but she looked different now. Smaller, uncertain. I wanted everyone here, she began, because Linnea is trying to steal our family home. She's manipulating the legal system and— Stop, I interrupted quietly. Just stop. I laid the court order on the table. This isn't manipulation. This is Grandma's explicit wishes, documented and notarized. She wanted me to have majority ownership. She told Sterling directly that she was worried about family control imbalance. She knew what you were like, Mom. She knew you'd try to control everything. Torrin picked up the court order and read it. His expression changed as he processed the information. 62%, Torrin said, looking at my mother. You told me Grandma left everything to you. My mother's face flushed. She was confused at the end. She meant exactly what she wrote. Sterling interrupted. I took her statement personally. She was completely lucid and very specific about her intentions. Torin looked between us, something shifting in his expression. Mom, did you know about this? When Grandma died, did you know Linnea was supposed to inherit the majority? Silence. Then quietly, yes. The admission hung in the air. You knew, Torin repeated slowly. And you hid it for 3 years. I was protecting our family, my mother insisted. She's irresponsible. She's always been a mess. The house would have fallen apart if she had control. I did what was necessary. You did what was cruel, Zella said firmly. You kicked her out with a child. You told her there was no space in a house she legally owned. That's not protection. That's abuse. My mother turned on Zella. You don't understand. You haven't been part of this family long enough to. I understand perfectly, Zella cut her off. I understand that you've spent years making Linnea look unstable so nobody would believe her when she finally stood up to you. I understand that you use family obligations to control people. And I understand that Grandma Winslet saw through all of it and protected Linnea the only way she could. My mother stood up abruptly. I won't sit here and be attacked in my own son's house. Then leave, Torin said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. What? My mother asked. Leave, Mom. I think you should go. My mother stared at Torin like he'd slapped her. You're choosing her side. I'm choosing the truth side, he said, his voice heavy. I've watched you treat Linnea like she's worthless for years. I went along with it because it was easier than standing up to you. But this is different. You hid legal documents. You kicked her out of a house she owned. That's not just mean. That's wrong. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but they looked manipulative rather than genuine. After everything I've done for this family, after all my sacrifices. What sacrifices? I asked quietly. You've lived comfortably in Grandma's house for 3 years. You've renovated with equity from a property I partially own. You've positioned yourself as the perfect hostess, the devoted mother, all while making me your scapegoat. Where's the sacrifice in that? She had no answer, just fury and humiliation. I want to make something clear, I continued. I'm not trying to destroy you. I could force you out completely. The court order gives me that right, but I'm not going to do that. I slid my proposal across the table. You can stay in the house. You'll pay rent for your portion, fair market rate. The guest suite goes back under my control. And any major decisions about the property require my approval as majority owner. That's my offer. My mother snatched up the paper and read it, her face cycling through emotions. You want me to pay rent? In my own home. In Grandma's home, I corrected. And now legally mostly mine. This is more generous than you deserve. She looked at Torin, at Zella, then back at me. And slowly the fight drained out of her, not because she'd seen the error of her ways, but because she'd lost. Fine, she said through gritted teeth. I'll sign your ridiculous terms. Good, I stood up. I'll have Sterling draw up the formal agreement. You have 7 days to clear out the guest suite. As I turned to leave with Sterling and Zella, my mother called out, You'll regret this, Linnea. Families don't recover from this kind of betrayal. I looked back at her. You're right, they don't. But you're the one who betrayed this family, not me. 1 week later, I stood in the guest suite with Kaida, looking at the freshly emptied room. My mother had removed all the new furniture, pettily, vindictively, leaving bare walls and empty space. But I didn't care. The room was mine now, ours. Can this be my room, Mama? Kaida asked, running her hand along the windowsill. Yes, baby, this can be your room. Over the next month, I moved us into the house. Not aggressively, not making a big statement, just quietly claiming what had always belonged to us. I set up Kaida's room with second-hand furniture painted bright colors. I turned Grandma's old sewing room into my bedroom. I planted flowers in the garden Grandma had loved. My mother stayed in her section of the house, and we maintained an icy distance. She paid her rent on time. Sterling made sure of that, but we barely spoke. Torin visited occasionally, awkward but trying. He apologized once, standing in the kitchen where we'd grown up. I should have questioned her, he said. I should have seen what she was doing to you. Yes, I agreed. You should have. I'm sorry. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Zella became a genuine friend, helping me navigate the strange reality of living in the same house as my mother. She talks about you to her friends, Zella told me one day. Paints herself as the victim. But fewer people believe her now. They've seen the court documents. They know the truth. Word had spread through my mother's social circles, the book clubs, the garden parties, the carefully curated community she'd built her identity around. And slowly, invitations dried up. Not because I'd said anything, I hadn't, but because people could see her for what she really was now. 3 months after moving in, I was sitting on the porch with Kaida when my mother came out the front door, dressed for one of her clubs. She paused when she saw us, her face tightening. "That's my chair you're sitting in," she said stiffly. I looked at the wicker porch furniture. "Actually, it's Grandma's chair, and Grandma left this house mostly to me, so technically it's my chair now." Something in her expression cracked, not with remorse, with defeat. "You've taken everything from me," she said quietly. "My home, my reputation, my family." "No," I said firmly. "I claimed what was already mine. You took from me first, my inheritance, my security, my dignity. You kicked me out with a child and told neighbors I was too chaotic to help. You made me a scapegoat my entire life. All I did was stop letting you." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. For once, she had no manipulation, no twist, no way to make herself the victim. "Grandma knew," I continued. "She knew exactly what you do, and she protected me anyway. That's not me taking from you, that's you facing consequences for your own choices." My mother descended the porch steps without another word. I watched her drive away, feeling not triumph but peace. Kaida leaned against my side. "Grandma sounds nice." She was, I agreed. She was very nice, and very smart. That evening, I found a letter in the mailbox, no stamp, just my name written on the envelope. Inside was a note from my mother. "I'll be moving out at the end of the month. I can't stay in a house where I'm made to feel like a guest. You win, Linnea." I read it twice, then folded it carefully and put it away. She could frame it as me winning if she wanted, but this wasn't about winning. It was about finally being seen, being heard, and having a home where my daughter was safe and wanted. The day my mother moved out, Torin helped her pack in tense silence. I stayed in my section of the house, giving them space. When she was ready to leave, she knocked on my door, the first time she'd done that since I'd moved in. "I'm going now," she said stiffly. I wanted to say goodbye to Kaida. I hesitated, then called Kaida from her room. My daughter approached cautiously, sensing the tension. "Goodbye, Grandma," she said politely. My mother's face softened for just a moment. "Goodbye, sweetheart. Be good for your mother." Then she looked at me. "I hope you're happy." "I hope I'm stable," I replied. "Happiness can come later." She left without another word. I watched from the window as Torin loaded the last boxes into her car. She drove away without looking back at the house she'd tried so hard to keep. Zella came over that evening with dinner and helped me start planning renovations. Real renovations this time, not performative ones. We talked about turning the dining room into a playroom for Kaida, about updating the kitchen, about making the house ours. "How does it feel?" Zella asked. "Owning your own home." I thought about it. Surreal. I went from being evicted to owning a house in the span of a few months, but it doesn't feel like I won something. It feels like I claimed something that was always meant to be mine. "Your grandmother knew what she was doing," Zella said. "She protected you even after she was gone." I looked around the house, at Kaida's artwork on the fridge, at the photos I'd hung of Grandma and me, at the life we were building. "Yes," I agreed. "She really did." 6 months after my mother left, I sat on the porch in the same wicker chair, watching Kaida play in the yard with her new friends from the neighborhood. The house felt different now, lighter, warmer, full of actual love instead of performance and control. Torin stopped by occasionally, trying to rebuild a relationship with genuine effort this time. He'd admitted that our mother was staying with a friend and still bitter, still playing the victim, but fewer people were listening to her stories now. I'd renovated the guest suite into a beautiful bedroom for Kaida, with walls painted the soft blue she'd chosen and curtains covered in stars. The room my mother had claimed didn't exist for us now held my daughter's dreams. Sterling had helped me set up a small trust fund using equity from the house, ensuring Kaida would have money for college. The same house my mother tried to deny me was now securing my daughter's future. I thought often about Grandma's note, "If your mother pushes you out again." Again. Like she'd always known I'd need one more chance, one more push to finally stand up and claim my space in the world. My mother had told me there was no space for me, but Grandma had made sure there always would be. Not just physical space, though that mattered, but space to exist, to be believed, to be valued. As the sun set over the yard, I whispered to the empty air, "Thank you, Grandma, for seeing me, for protecting me, for making sure I had somewhere to belong." The house settled around me with creaks and sighs, familiar and welcoming. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly at home. Not because of the walls or the rooms, but because this space was mine by right, not by permission. My mother had tried to erase me. Grandma had made sure that was impossible. And now I was teaching Kaida that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is refuse to stay small when someone tries to shrink you. My mother said she had no space for me, minutes before the delivery truck arrived with furniture for a room she claimed didn't exist. But Grandma had always known the truth. There was plenty of space. I just had to be brave enough to claim it.